think we can go with 4.
Let me call the Restore Advisory Committee agenda to Thursday, February 4th, 2021, on our 6 p.m. hybrid meeting. Due to COVID participation for this meeting, it will be held through the Communications Media Technology WebEx, email, or through a public comment kiosk located outside the BOC boardroom. BCC boardroom will remain closed to the public, but we do have some public here today. If you're a person with a disability who needs any accommodation in order to participate in this proceeding, you are entitled at no cost to you the provision of certain assistance within 2 working days of the office. So of this notice, please contact zoning code in the future. So I'll call the meeting to order. Oh, this could be who we need. There he is. All right. Hey, Bruce. All right, so we'll call the meeting to order. Would everybody please rise for the invocation?
O merciful Creator, your hand is open wide to satisfy the needs of every living creature. Make us thankful for your loving providence and grant that we, remembering the account that we must one day give, may be faithful stewards of your good gifts. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Todd, a quick starter over there. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Jack Mariano.
Here.
Cynthia Armstrong.
Here.
Dr. Lisa Richardson.
Here.
Lauren Maselli. Kristen Tonkin.
Here.
And Bruce Mills.
Here.
Thanks.
Okay. There'll be a time for public comment. Anyone in the audience who want to come forward, we'll do that first. Want to speak on public comment?
Good evening.
Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Nicholas Mudry. I live at 5415 Gilbeth Drive, Newport Richey, Florida, 34652. What I would like to address is Ordinance 1000, the subsection 2, where it says roof overhang, coverings, walls, enclosure, and other similar visual obstructions.
Hey, Nick, that would be for the board meeting. If you want to talk about the dredging part, restoration part of the channels. Okay. That's what this one's for. Okay. I've been assisting the county a little bit on the dredging, and the constituents in my association are for the dredging. I live in Gulf Landings. It's 576 units. We would like to see the dredging to increase the property values of our community. And I'm willing to assist the county in any way possibility for it. Okay. You know, I've assisted the commissioner in some research on the dredging, and we're willing to help. That's
So
it.
I have a question. What's your background?
My background? I worked for the federal government for 34 years. I was the housing manager in MacDill Air Force Base for 12 years. I did assist in the construction and the dredging of the canal down there. I have a bachelor's degree.
Gotcha.
He's also past president of the landings.
Right on.
It was very helpful as we looked area to area where we're going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Come on up, Deborah. Deborah's the president of the Woodlands Association.
I take this off.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Deborah Leone, and I'm currently serving as the president of Gulf Harbors Woodlands Association. I live at 4630 Dewey Drive, Newport Richey, Florida, 34652. Where we ended up with the dredging is 2009. We actually did a joint dredge with Gulf Landings, a couple small areas. They're also now filled in again. So it's, I guess probably in 2018, we started looking at what it would cost for our neighborhood to dredge on our own. And that didn't pass. In 2019, we actually met with Commissioner Mariano and some other folks from the county and got some ideas of what we could do for dredging. Went back, our budget actually passed for the year 2020. We set aside about $100,000 for dredging. We had a hydrological survey done, probably right around the same time the county had theirs done. So we could come up with a plan for our particular neighborhood. So some of the canals are shared, which we wouldn't be able to do without consent and agreement with Gulf Landings. And we've got about 4 areas that we could dredge that are Gulf Harbors Woodlands Association members only. So where we are right now is we've got 2 canals that we could afford to do that are really the worst of the worst. Commissioner Mariano and I went last Thursday, Friday, one of those days, looked at it at low tide. Quite a few have 0 water at low tide. So there was one, I've got pictures and I sent those over, and not sure how much has been shared with the committee yet. So we were looking at the possibility of a grant, maybe through stormwater funds. I had spoken to a gentleman in Hillsborough County that basically was a big help to me, saying maybe there's funds out there to help you, so it's not just the homeowners. And so we kind of went down that avenue, and then it was recommended maybe we talk to the Restore Committee to see, because we are really trying to restore the canals to the original 5-foot depth. These 2 canals we're looking at right now are generally 4 feet, and when you get closer to where there's direct runoff or drainage into the canal, you can see it's like 2 and 3 feet. And at the end of the one canal, it's, there's just mud piled up. So there's definitely issues. And, with this, once we do the dredging, we'd also like to then work on mitigation to obviously stop it from happening again. And these canals have not been dredged, to my knowledge, in probably the 40 years that we've been there. So that's kind of where we're trying to get on a 10-year plan, thinking we can do it cheaper. And a lot of the numbers, they're doable. We just need to either get it in the budget or, get on board with the county and whatever the county plan is. But these particular canals we're looking at right now are not part of the plan that Pasco County has in place. So I'm not sure. That's about all I really need to say. I don't know if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And we'll discuss that on very shortly. So if you guys want to hang around for that too, you'll hear us talk about it a little bit.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak from the audience? All right. Is anyone in the kiosk? No one's in the kiosk? Anyone online? All right, so we'll close public comment. Topics for discussion. We've got minutes for the previous meetings, minutes from February 6th, 2020, minutes from July 9, 2020, and meeting minutes from December 3rd, 2020. Can I have a motion for all 3?
So moved.
Approve them all.
Second. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. So information items number 4. We're going to talk about the Gulf Harbors and Hudson Channels Dredge Project update. Pam, you'll lead us with that, or just George?
Yeah.
Okay.
For that project, we have received a revised scope and fee for the project right now. We have to discuss the project. Right. So for that project, we have recently received a revised cost and scope for the project, and the cost was kind of high initially. So the current cost is $497,000 to get it designed, permitted, and up to before construction. And it also includes bidding assistance. So we are trying to see if we could do a piggyback contract to do the project, to have it done by GBA. That's the firm that did the original study. If that's not possible, we have to do another RSQ. So we are reviewing the contract, the scope, and the piggyback contract, and make sure it'll work.
Okay. Do we have the funding for that yet?
I believe the funding is going to be done by taking a loan from another department, from
Okay.
general funds. That's the idea for now. And it's gonna
Okay.
get paid later.
All right, so probably, go ahead, continue, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's the idea. The work will now be done with stormwater fund. It'll be done by a loan from another department. And it'll be reimbursed with an MSBU or with RAC funding or other grants that are available.
Okay. All right. So initially, we put in to do a countywide exemption, you call it, for permitting through DEP. We picked every canal up and down the coast, including the ones that are here. DEP wanted us to shorten that up before we got a request going in. We are currently putting a proposal in front of the state legislature where they're going to try to put a bill in which will streamline the language, which actually clarifies very clearly that if a canal was built before April 3rd, 1970, we're automatically exempt and we can go just notify DEP and do the permitting. This is partly because the Army Corps has also transferred a lot of their responsibility to the DEP as well. So if that happens, that makes all these projects easier. Part of the reason I reached out to Deborah and Nick is because their projects were built after that point in time, but figuring that we were going to need another chunk of money to go do this, to exempt everything from the aquatic reserve and look at funding for, or look at protecting them from the aquatic reserve, which makes the permitting easier, that this would be a good idea to go forward. So as of tonight, I'm glad you get the number down lower because we thought the number could be as high as 600,000 to 1.2. That number is a lot better than what I thought it was. So as far as the funding goes, if we do need to borrow, we need to check that out.
Yeah.
Not as concerned with that, but I would like to take a look at trying to include the woodlands and the landings to be part of some funding so they can, again, protect it from the aquatic reserve. They're each raising money on their own. I think, Nick, didn't you guys raise about 40 or 80 grand?
For me?
Come up to the mic if you would. To the mic. When you guys were, when you were president, you guys were raising money as well?
We haven't raised any money as yet after your last briefing to our community, but the majority of the property owners of the 576 units, they didn't object to a certain amount of money. So we were arbitrarily talking about $1,000 per unit.
And they were pretty well agreeable to that?
We're pretty much so, yes. I mean, it has to go in front of the board has to approve it and things like that. Okay. But for an assessment, the only thing is that the residents were asking that if they contributed $1,000 the unit, then they did not want to be hit with the MSBU because then that's being hit twice.
Right. If we're going to structure it that way, and we may have to go that way, the 1,000 may not be enough, but at least if everybody that's on a canal puts in 1,000, they'll be credited for that on the MSBU.
Correct. And if we look at every residential unit from Hernando County down to Pinellas County, and I was looking at the numbers of Hurricane Irma. The evacuation order said that there were some 51,000 residence units had to be evacuated. If we say that, let's just say 50% of those units had water access to the Gulf, direct access or indirect. If we go and think about a fair assessment, if we assessed those units that had direct or indirect, and what do I mean by indirect? Like Sea Pines is indirect because that's a private channel. You got to have a key to get into that. Last time I was up there, things might have changed, but the waterways belong to the federal government. It's, that's Pasco County, right? So if you took 50% of that number, 51,000, and if you assess them $1,000 over 6 years, it's $166.33 over a 6-year period. And I know the counties can borrow money from the state. This happens for projects. So I would think if we could get the numbers and crunch the numbers to see actually who has waterfront property, and to include something like Seaview Place. There's the condominiums, but they have slips, not only just the individual owners. The more people into this project diminishes the cost greatly. And what does it do? It raises our property values. Our property values are minuscule to that of Pinellas County. And that benefits everybody. I know a lot of the ongoings of the building out of 41 that has a lot of people's attention, but I had the privilege of sitting on the changes for the comprehensive plan. I was invited by the county to sit on it. And one of the most important things, we could only vote on 3 things. One of the things was the revitalization of West Pasco County, west of 19. 2 was the dredging. Those were the 2 out of the whole audience. Those 2 items were number 1 and number 2, because we know that the economics that will bring into Pasco County.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And so as we look at the funding down the road, we got a lot of different avenues to look at. The MSBU is a strong way to go. Part 1 money is what I'm looking at as far as getting started, if it helps us tonight to go that way. And Deborah, I'm glad you brought up as far as the stormwater funds that Hillsborough used, because I didn't make that reference when I talked to Mike Carbella. I will do that. If you can get me the information from the person from Hillsborough, I will give him that data. If that makes it easier for him, that may just speed this up in that regard, where we can just go quicker. For the total dredge itself, I think somehow we got to look at putting the landings and the woodlands back into the mix for some type of funding, because any type of funding by the Restore Act exempts them from the aquatic preserve legislation, which, you know, the woodlands say they're struggling getting the permitting done right now. This may make it a lot easier for them. And then we can still look at, again, the MSBU up and down the road, but I want to look at all the sources we can for part 1. Part 2 is we're always looking at part 3 for one part of it. Anyone have any comments to adding the 2 of them in at this point?
I'm fine with that. I'd just like to say, I mean, I'm all for dredging, and it's really nice to hear that they're raising money or plan to raise money, because I think that's pretty important. We need to add more canals to it, and if they're all putting money in, that's good. And philosophically, I think it's good because it's raising their property value. But I like the idea.
Yeah, just like we studied with Dewberry, I think back in 13, this committee pushed Dewberry coming forward. I think the county actually funded the first phase, was done in 2013. The second was completed in 17. GBA just took this one over, and it was looking at all the counties. The only reason we started with these 3 were the easiest ones to get done, because they're all maintenance channels already done. And we thought that would be a good first place to get started. And then the goal is to do every single channel in the county. It's good for the restoration, which dredging is a great word, but restoration hits more with the committee as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, I do like the fact that they're willing to put money into it, because I think some communities when it's just benefiting that community, I think it's very important that they do that, where other canals are more open to the public and would have more public use. So I think there is a distinction between them.
Yeah, we were in, and I'm very happy to say that these 2 groups here, they get it, they're into it. You know, I think it was Port Richey that came up with that $1,000 number 20 years ago. And that's just a number I've always brought out where every committee I've gone to. It's at least a minimum number that shows the commitment to the people they want to see it done. And then again, the MSBU could be something smaller numbers per year. And then we set up a long-term plan. Matter of fact, we're out at the Woodlands the other day. I'm looking at the water coming down off Marine Parkway, goes into one of those condominium projects. Garnett was the road, and then in that road, all the water just goes straight into this little drop-off. Not a filter, not a clog, nothing to hold the water at all. So all the silt goes into the canal. And I think long-term we should be looking at, and we'll get to this later on with solar, is to go put a container there, kind of like a drain, to hold it all right in one spot. So when all that water comes in, it gets treated before it gets released. See, we have a vac truck come in and just go pull it all out and go, instead of getting it out of the channel. We just take it out of the edge of the road, which would be quick and simple to do. it'll control it so much better. So I think that's part of what we'll look at for long term. All right, so we'll hold on talking about anything more about what to do next with that, but let's do the Key Vista and Bailey's Bluff Shore Stabilization Project update.
Hello, you guys recognize me?
Oh, yes. How are you doing?
Good. That's right. Hey, what, number 8 in the nation? So, Curtis Franklin, Parks and Rec Project Manager, running the Key Vista program. Can you bring up, you have the presentation? Yeah. All right, this was a project that was approved by you guys last year, I believe it was, at the very beginning of the year. We got it approved by Treasury, the project was issued, and we are currently in design mode on this project. So there's actually work that's being put into this. The project overview, as you guys recall, this is talking about hardening the existing shoreline. That shoreline along Rocky Creek is washing out. And what happens is it washes out a little bit, the water level goes down, the boaters go, oh, I can't get out of Sleepy Lagoon, so I better get up on plane and come around and go a little bit faster, washes out a little bit faster, and it's like a vicious cycle here. So one of the things we want to do is we want to harden the existing shoreline. We also want to remove the sediment from Rocky Creek and redeposit it on the shoreline. There's two reasons that I want to do that. One, it's a lot more cost effective to take the sediment right there out of that area and put it back up on the shoreline. I don't need to pump it. I don't need to truck it. I don't need a DMMA. I don't need to do any of that stuff. The other thing that does is it helps me build back that shoreline that used to exist. Taking what was there and I'm restoring that. So we're going to do both those two different things. And then as funding it allows, we're going to improve the amenities. It talks about constructing an observation platform. This is actually going to be a small kayak launch / observation platform that you can walk out along the edge of the water there. If you're familiar with the park, it's going to be right there where the existing canoe kayak launch is. Okay, just north of that. Or, I'm sorry, just east of that. We're going to improve the trail from the parking lot to the boat launch. Hopefully we'll raise that trail up about 1.5 feet with all the sediment that we're going to take out. And we're going to do things like harden that, put a shellscape in there, harden it up, because if you've ever dragged a kayak across that 500 yards, that's a long ways in sugar sand to drag a kayak. So we acknowledge that, and we're going to try to improve that to make it so people can get in there with that. And then we're going to also construct some waterside platforms. The reason that a lot of that shoreline is eroding is people are accessing that. They want to go down there, they want to fish, they want to put the dogs in the water, whatever the case may be. And when they do, they knock down the mangroves. Knock down the mangroves, you get a little bit more erosion, things like that. Well, one of the ways that we can solve that is put some waterside platforms so that people can get into that area, not impact the shoreline nearly as much, and basically still access the water and still provide that service. So we're going to do that as well. And then the trail improvement we just talked about. Our current budget is $500,000 from Restore, and then there's also $140,000 from the GO bond. Next slide, please. We have selected an engineering firm. It's Land and Water Engineering Science. It's one of the 4 contracted service firms that we have with the county right now under Parks and Rec. They're out there, they're doing the survey and they're doing the geotech work. Mid-March, I'm expecting to get those first surveys done, get some drawings back to see what stuff looks like. Hopefully look at some of the gator dredge stuff that was happening way back when. July, we're going to be doing seagrass and seagrass type surveys. Those are required anytime you do a dredge in this state. So we'll get those done. As soon as we get that stuff done, we're going to go ahead and apply for the permit to do the maintenance dredge on that Rocky Creek. That'll be in fall 2021. So the spring 2022 bids going out and everything else is subjective because I can't control the Army Corps of Engineers, how fast they move with the permitting process and everything else. They are aware of this project already. We've been through a couple iterations of talking to them about it, so they know what's going to happen, and hopefully I've sped that process up. But that's what we're shooting for right now is spring of 2022. We wrote the grant. The grant was for a 3-year period. Last year was the first year. We're in year 2, so we got to be dredging hopefully by the summer of next year, or we'll do a grant extension and we'll extend that time frame out. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a view of what we're going to do, where we're going to dredge. The dredge is 1,500 linear feet, so we'll take all that soil and deposits from there. We're not going to break up any rocks. We're not going to blow anything up in the canal. We're not going to do anything like that. But we're going to take the soils and we're going to put them back up on the trail. That's the green line. So everything from the red line there is hopefully going to go back up onto the green line. The yellow points are places where we're going to do samples to make sure that we're not putting contaminants and whatever back up onto the shoreline. All right. There are still several rocks that are in that channel. It's called Rocky Creek for a reason. If you've ever been up there, we are not removing any of those rocks. Okay. Removing those requires a lot more cost. And quite frankly, the purpose behind this is not to provide boater access so much as it is to provide flushing water. This was a restoration project, and the reason behind it is to restore the flushing water to Sleepy Bayou. As a side benefit, the residents that are up there in Bailey's Bluff area will get a little bit of improvement, but you'll notice by the dredge line there, we're stopping before we get to the first house. And that's just to make sure that there's no conflict of interest when we go to do that. Okay, so that's one of the reasons we're doing there. Any questions on the project?
If you would go back to the slide there. You can go back to the previous one with the picture of there it is. So when I was just talking about the soil displacement, are you familiar with that legislation? The exemption, soil displacement? If you take soil in a canal and you're going to go then put it back to where it came from as far as in the mangroves, et cetera. If they're upland mangroves, you can be exempt from a lot of the permitting process. So kind of what you're doing is the same thing, but I don't know if you're taking the full effect of it, because as far as going in there, you can take everything that's in there, spray it up onto the uplands behind the mangroves, on top of the mangroves.
That'd be good.
If it's upland, the legislation that we're asking for right now takes care of the coast, and Bailey's Bluff is in that mix as far as getting done. If that gets approved, it may save us a whole bunch of money on that cost going through. It might even let you go further up into those homes and even suck it out and just blow it up instead. Pam, if you would get him the legislation we've submitted, or Colleen can work with you too. I want you to see it, because I frankly didn't know that you're going to be still in tune to this, even though you started the project. And
that'd be great.
Those, Curtis has been a phenomenal asset to this whole committee from day one. But yeah, if you would take a look, we've sent it up there. You can take a look, and that may be something you can talk to the consultant about. By June, they would have to have their approval done. So if your application's for mid-March is for the initial drawings, by that time, they can take a look at it. When they do their surveys, let them go look at those upland mangroves to tie that in together. They may be familiar with it as well, but not know that we're actually going to change this legislation, because it's in there, but it's not as clear as it needs to be. Because, for instance, all we should have to do is give them notice. Well, they're saying to us, well, you got to do more than notice. You got to do all the permitting stuff, which is completely different what it says. So we're getting that clarified. If we get it clarified, that will streamline a lot of this process, and that will still give time for the July timeframe to be right in the mix of it.
Okay, that'd be great. So we patterned putting the soil deposits back up. We patterned that based on the Army Corps' own dredge desires for Anclote River Park. They wanted to dredge Anclote River right in front of the park and then put all the sand and stuff right back up onto the shore at the park. So I wrote the thing exactly like what their project was going to be. So it's going to be hopefully a little bit harder to say no, but that's good information. Anything we can have to strengthen it legislation-wise is great. So.
Curtis, I remember, unless I'm remembering wrong, I thought Mark Schwartzel was here one time saying they'd raised a whole bunch of money to help dredge this. Can they extend that down past the houses if they pay that, or make it part of it?
We have been in touch with the Bailey's Bluff Association is the one that did it. It was under Paul Manuel, under Coastal Design Consultants. They have a group out there, the Bailey's Bluff organization, and they've raised like $40,000 to do that. I have forwarded the information to the engineering firm to that group, and yes, they can tag in, but that's a separate project, and I don't want to mix the funds, so to speak. So they're welcome to tag in with that particular one, and if the people are going to be in there dredging already and they want to tag in and do $40,000 worth of extra dredging, yeah, we're not going to stop that. It's just, I don't want to mix their money into with our money because it just becomes it could be construed as a conflict of interest, mixing private funds with restore funds, which are public designated funds.
Okay. Well, now that you say that, is there a problem to mix funds from these other groups in the future projects?
I would be very careful how I mix funds. If you, if that group makes a donation, $40,000 to the county to do engineering in their particular area, I would make sure that I can definitely draw the line where that funding stopped and the restore funding started. Okay, I would advise you to make sure of that so that you don't get into that. Because if you mix those two funds, then you can get into the audit for the Treasury. I've already done that once with SunWest. It's not a lot of fun. So I would recommend that there's a clear line between those two groups where your project starts and stops. They can run concurrently, but make them separate.
Well, let me ask this, because one of the things we've talked about years ago was always leveraging. That's what the Easter Egg Committee, when the consortium was setting up, they want to get as much leveraging as they can. I can't think of a better source than the people to be part of the leveraging. So,
and if the funds are donated to the county for the purpose of, doing the dredge or whatever with no strings attached, but if you're coming in and saying, hey, if the Woodlands will come in and donate $40,000, then we'll go do the dredge in your area, you can see how that may be a conflict there that you got to be very careful of.
in this particular one, I'll give you that, but with these other ones these are a lot of residences. They do have some businesses on the other sections, not these two in particular. So it is something that if we do set up the MSBU, that's going to be, again, individuals contributing as well.
Yeah, and if it's through an MSBU, then combining the funds is no different than me combining the funds with the general obligation bond, because that is an approved, publicly approved fund source for that. So.
All right, so if I just set them up with having them do the MSBU with us, and they can take that chunk of money they have already, that does simplify it for them.
I'm not an attorney, but I would say that yes, as long as you can separate, or you can show the path of those funds was done through a public type of domain and not something private. I wouldn't want to, my advice is not to bring private source of funding in and try to mix it with the public restore funds because of the way the Restore Act reads.
We've had paving assessment we did. For instance, one was in Heritage Springs. We did the main road, Robert Trent Jones going in there. And the people at Heritage Springs were at the very end of the paving project. And what they did was they collected their money from themselves, and thereby not having to do all the recording fees for that whole area, it shortened up the money that they needed, and they just paid us that way, and we did the paving project. Maybe we can do something along that line here.
That's possible. I would just, whatever your plan is, we have a very good working relationship. Pam and I both do with Andrew up at Treasury Department. So before I would make that commitment, I would make sure that I talk to them first and they understand what we're going to do so that you don't get that conflict later down the road when you're trying to justify it. It's better to get the permission first in this case than beg for forgiveness afterwards.
So I want to make sure we make the next step is the right step. And again, it's kind of a moving target a little bit. Right. These guys were in, then they were out, now they're in, and they're going to be treated differently because of the April 3rd, 1970 Act anyway, for the soil displacement part. But still, I think we can protect them for the aquatic preserve bid that right now is put onto the whole county of Pasco. So maybe let's do a meeting with Joe, myself, the consultant, George and Pam, and let's kind of talk about what's the best way to set this up. Because I don't want to go to the residents and saying one thing and then all of a sudden we're going to change it down the road. Let's go put that plan together now. And if it means we got to do a conversation with Treasury quickly, we'll go do that too. But I want to make sure this next step leads up everything we need to do before I go and get my costs together, before I go and get my MSBU for everybody else.
Yep. Anything you can do to minimize that conflict out there with the federal government lawyer stuff? Yeah, I advise that.
Okay.
Anything else?
Are you going to hang around?
In the back.
Good. Thank you. Okay, any more questions about Key Vesta Billy's Bluff? Okay. All right, so let's go to the next project steps, which is Sea Pines, Westport, Harbortown, and SunWest. And these are all the rest of the major channels up and down the coast. presentation or just when I got to talk?
I don't have a presentation,
Okay.
so whatever you want to say.
Okay. All right, so the folks up in Sea Pines, they have a channel that was dredged before. It shows it was done pre-1970. They want to get their channel dredged, and they've got a few spots in their channel, kind of like we did at Hudson Channel, Signal Cove, where there's a few spots to be addressed. We want to get that addressed as well. Westport, their channel shows it was done there as well. That would be one that we can actually look at adding as well. Harbor Town, up at SunWest, that channel is owned half by the county, half by the developer, and that channel does show markings to go all the way out as well. So depending on how this legislation comes together, if it does pass with being able to use that exemption, it makes it all the permitting so much easier. No worry about what to do with the soils as far as reimbursing the state if we make money on it, just kind of like lets us go do our thing all the way through it. So at some point, I want to bring this in to the mix, George, to put this part of the GBA study coming up again. It's going to be a bigger number going up and down, but I think it's something that all these folks are now ready. And as we're moving with one step, you say it's going to take how long to do this next GBA study for 500 grand?
It's about 18 months.
About 18 months? So do you think we should be looking at putting all this together in one shot?
If you get the funds, yeah.
Okay. And how, Pam, how much do we have right now in Part 1 funds?
Currently, we don't. Just working. You don't have to push that? Okay. I don't know how it works. Currently, we don't have anything available to us in any of the funds. So what would have to happen is we would have to get in touch with Treasury and talked with our contact there. And also I would get in touch with Dan Doherty from the Balmoral Group to find out how we would proceed with that. There is a process that we are looking into right now as far as how to bring these projects back. I don't know if we can just go ahead and include these projects as part of the study that's already existing, or if we're going to have to bring it back as new projects. And if we do that, we're going to have to open it up to the entire county for everybody to come back with projects that they have, if there are funds available from Restore. The last amount of money that we had available to us was the $1.4 million that was sitting in pot 3. No?
Yes, Part 3.
Pot 3, okay. And we submitted the amendment to the state expenditure plan for the channel restoration project, which is the Gulf Harbors and Hudson Channel dredge. That is going to use up that whole $1.4 million that was on the books for us. So to my knowledge, at this point, we do not have anything that we can ask for without us opening up the process again. That's my understanding of it today. I don't know. Joe, do you have anything more that you can add? He's there, I saw him.
No, yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we had talked earlier that to add additional projects to our dredging list would require going through the screening process as we've done in the past to get to where we are today. So there is a process we'd have to go through.
Now, I thought when we did the Bailey's Bluff, we kind of tapped out all of our Part 1 funds, but it's been 2 years at least since then.
Mm-hmm.
So we should have at least 2 years worth of income that's sitting there.
Again, I can check, but I don't know of anything. The only thing I knew of was the 1.4 million, but I can definitely look into that and find out. I'm not really sure. I mean, we told the Restore Council that we were going to, when the projects were brought to the committee, that they would be screened by you and ranked and then sent to them for their approval. And that is the process we told them that we would work with. And I think that if we change that without amending our process formally with them.
Yeah.
It might create some issues. I don't know. This is the first time we've,
No, I
approached this, so.
and I agree.
yeah.
But I don't know, see how the committee feels, but I think, dredging has become such a forefront for up and down the whole coast. I think it's worth bringing back, and then the committee's going to take input and feedback, but we will be the recommended body to the Board of County Commissioners. If you guys think we want to look at doing that, we can bring that back, and I would say we bring that back in and do it all in one shot. And then at the same time, when we could do that ask, I think we should be making our first ask for Part 2 money. Now, Part 2 money is where we have all the 5 states that were affected by the consortium and the 6 federal agencies that sit together separately competing with projects up and down. I think we got a shot at getting some money, and being that we do have the time on our side actually to get to that point, it's a good ask, even if it's not only just for these sets of channels, but maybe the other ones can be included as well. If we get that money, it's a huge step forward to restoration and I think the economic vitality of all the county up and down.
Yeah, I'm just backing up a little bit. I know in the past we've had some updates as far as exactly where the Part 1, Part 2, Part 3 monies are in the projects that had come out and what we've done. I think as time goes on, I think we need that overview update and really a little refresher is what's Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 are, what the requirements are. If you don't mind doing that, it's just that it's been so long.
Yeah, not at all. I need the refresher too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely.
Because I was trying to find my old notes and they're so old, they've kind of gone into heaven.
Yeah.
I always mix up Part 1. Part 3 is the local county one, basically.
The Part 3
Part 1 is the
actually
state.
most difficult one to go through. It's a state expenditure plan.
Okay.
You gotta take a plan, move it forward, bring it, have it approved by the state, and then it goes to the treasury process, which we've just moved it from the consortium to the treasury at this point, so they're looking at it right now. And I think is it 60 days before we get that back?
Oh, if you would like to. Curtis is our resident expert.
Yes, I know. He taught us all early.
So that he could probably refresh you.
All right, breakdown of the funds again. Pot 1 is our local component. That's the funds that are come directly here to the county. That's the funds that this committee works with, okay? They're the ones that make the recommendation for the committee. That's what you guys were formed to execute and spend on. Pot 2 is your federal funds. Those are the funds that, the way that flows is we come up with a project, we submit that project to our Florida Department of Environmental Protection. FDEP will take every project from throughout the state. They form a board, they rank those projects, they determine which ones that they want to forward on. And from there, they forward that select group of projects to the governor for signature. The governor signs it and he sends it up to what's called the Gulf Coast Economic Restoration Council. That's the federal council. And then the federal council will select from all those projects. And that's how those Pot 2 funds flow. And then Pot 3 is the money that's controlled through the Gulf Consortium. It's the 23 different counties that are out there that work together to come up with what's called the state expenditure plan. And the state expenditure plan is basically the execution plan for all the money that's involved with the Pot 3. For that, this county put in 13 different projects, I believe it was. And you guys have redesignated some of those, the 1.4 million from the Cruise Lake project, the reclaimed water project for Cruise Lake was redesignated towards the dredging. So that's the source of the 1.4 million.
But has that been approved yet? But does that still need to be approved?
I don't know. I don't do that anymore.
As of last Thursday, the Gulf Consortium met. They approved the draft state expenditure plan, the amendment to the state expenditure plan. And that will go, which includes the dredging project, as well as others from other counties. It will go to the Restore Council. It probably already has. The Restore Council will take a final look at it, and we're expecting to hear back probably by April 1st. It's already gone out for the 45-day public comment didn't really get anything back that was of concern. So it seems it's moving forward and shouldn't really be any problem. The reason we had the $1.4 million from the Cruise Lake project is that was withdrawn. Staff withdrew that project because we were not going to move forward with it. And so that was kind of sitting there waiting for a project such as this to come along. The Board of County Commissioners went ahead and approved that project to be submitted to the Restore. And so, yeah, it looks like by April 1st, we should have definite answers.
So it'd be kind of hard to add on these other projects to that if that's already been submitted.
So my understanding, don't correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is they do periodic updates to that state expenditure plan. So it's a living, breathing document. It's not once you've done it, that's it. We only going to amend it once in a great while. I think that the Balmoral group, which runs that, is doing frequent updates. Like every 6 months, they come up with a new reiteration of that state expenditure plan.
Okay.
So, and that's a lot of work. So she's done good.
Yeah. So refresh. I know there's different criterias for the different pots. Like pot. I know pot 1 I'm pretty familiar with, but pot 2 and pot 3. What is the focus of those pots as far as what the project should accomplish?
Well, pot 3 is the Gulf Consortium met. Commissioner was on there, and they decided to split up that money evenly between all 23 counties. So each county got a share of like $13.5 million. And then we took the projects that were out there on a big list. We took a bunch of those projects. We took them to the board that you guys had ranked and based on the rankings. And we took that forward to the Gulf Coast Consortium and said, these are our projects that we're going to do. And that's how we designated that money. We basically filled up that $13 million with those projects. Is how those were selected.
Okay, so pot 3.
But we used the grading criteria and stuff like that.
Right, so pot 3 is pretty much done now?
Pot 3, the money's designated in pot 3 unless there's a change by the board to the state expenditure plan.
Yeah, but pot 1, that's the one that they're going to constantly be adding money to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're doing that with all of them because BP is paying over the 15-year period for every single one of them. But yeah, pot 1 is really your guys' bread and butter when it comes to designating the funds and everything else.
You know, with the state expenditure fund,
Good.
all that money was allocated through the years. We actually got, I'll say, it was supposed to be like 4-year allocations. We probably got 6 years worth of allocations right off the bat. So we did very, very well.
Yeah, I just remember when we were ranking pot 1, we had specific criteria that we had to rank them on as far as economic, as far as environmental, different issues, different things we had to rank them on. So that's so it sounds like pot 2 and pot 3 don't really have that criteria that we had for pot 1.
Well, if you recall, we made criteria because at the time we didn't know. We made criteria for pot 1, pot 2, and pot 3 because we thought we had to have everything done by that summer, and I took away your guys' spring, and I apologize for that back in 2013. Okay, but there was several different criteria set up. So, but there was also a process that was put in place for you guys to go through and screen the projects and make the recommendations. So the process is you guys come up with a project, okay? And right now, my understanding is dredge projects are on there, but you close the rack to other new projects. That's my understanding. So dredge, you would come up with a project presentation for a particular dredge, bring it here to the board, or bring it here to the rack, excuse me. The rack would grade it, sit down, grade it, rank it, and then determine if they want to fund it or how they want to fund it or take care of it compared to all the other projects. And then from there, you guys would make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners that, hey, we're recommending you guys put $500,000 from pot 1 money to dredging channels. And Pam would take that to the board under a BCC memo. BCC would discuss it if they would so desired, and they would do the final approval on expending that funds. And that's basically the executive level of how that process was set up to work. So, and then the criteria, Cynthia, if you remember this, the criteria was broken down in all the different ways to do it, where size of impact for the public, natural restoration score, infrastructure score. There's all these different criteria, and we used what was in the Restore Act to do that. So that was how those grade sheets were set up. So
I just didn't know if we still needed to use those same grade sheets on these projects.
for new projects, I would recommend that because that's the process that you've set up. That's the process we've told Treasury that we do. We've told them in our multi-year implementation program plans that we've sent up to Treasury and said, this is how we do it. So if you guys change the process, then you guys change the process, but you need to make sure that, your future multi-year plans that you send up are done. But the process was set up because the Restore Act, if you recall, was set up to get maximized public engagement. That's what the purpose of it was. And so that's why we set it up with the way it was.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could interject, I think Curtis touched on it, but it all goes back to the Restore Act. The Restore Act has criteria. The money has to be spent and it has to meet those criteria, and the Department of the Treasury has the right to come back even after you've spent the money to make sure the projects meet that criteria. And if it doesn't, then you have to give the money back. So you have to follow the Restore Act throughout the process.
Yeah.
So Curtis, the way we had it structured, we kind of put categories together with each different set of criteria. And we ranked them out 1 to 5.
Yes.
0 to 5, actually, whether it hit or not.
Yes.
And maybe we need to take another look at that if we're going to try to bring this back, because this will hit restoration tremendously hard, but it's going to be light in a lot of other categories.
Right.
Is it too much to be changing that out or giving more strength?
I wouldn't change it out. I mean, remember that we developed that score sheet criteria directly from the wording that was in the act.
Right.
Okay, so that's how we incorporated the act into what you guys do, because we said, we're going to grade according to this. And you guys can grade it. And then you come back and you discuss it, and there's still public opportunity to come in and say, hey, look, we don't agree with the way you guys graded this. Mm-hmm. But you also got to remember that we took some of the projects that were a little bit lower down in the grading, and we decided to make those a priority, because in the end, you guys talked about that and said, hey, this is 10 years out down the road. We won't have the money for this for the next 10 to 15 years. We don't want to wait. Let's take this project that ranked a little bit lower, and let's do that first, because I can get to that. So that's in your guys' prerogative to do that, but you still got to follow you're weighing it against the act to make sure that it is applicable to the act. And that's one of the things that those score sheets does.
Okay. And if we had a tremendous amount of public input from these people, that would actually weigh that into consideration.
There's one of the scores is actually the public impact. I believe it was, how many people were impacted by this particular project. It was one of the scores that we put in there. Mm-hmm. But, again, if you have a line of 75 people here, that's public engagement. Mm-hmm. And when we submit projects, we actually take public comment. And in the past, Orange Lake, SunWest, some of these other ones, I've had 50 or 60 comments or letters that people have sent me saying, we like this we like this project, we're in support of it. So, that's the whole purpose behind this, is to demonstrate to Treasury that you are engaging the public. And I think the wording is to the maximum possible engaging the public. Mm-hmm. So we do it by, she goes out there and she writes newspaper articles or publishes it in newspapers, and we advertise it on the county website, which is a publicly available website, and stuff like that to maximize that public engagement.
And I can tell you, wherever I go, and most of my meetings tend to be pretty much all these coastal areas that have canals that want to talk about what's the update with the dredging. Where do we stand? Where do we stand? Where do we stand? So just like you saw those two just talking to them today, they were a little hesitant to come in not knowing what was going to be on the agenda, but just to put that impetus that they do want to see it. And I'm going to tell you, from everywhere up and down, the benefits are phenomenal. For resale, for property values going up, demographics getting better, stronger, better water quality access, better water quality. It seems to be pretty strong. So maybe we can schedule a meeting coming up. We'll kind of do a overview of the Restore Act itself, parts 1, 2, and 3. We can talk about the criteria sheet. And then maybe at that point, we'll have our meeting before that, so we can kind of talk about what's the best way to look at structuring this to kind of get the public engaged fully, that not only will it be money from their neighborhood, but also, and if it need to be donation from the neighborhood, but also setting up an MSBU after we know what better costs are set up.
Yeah, that sounds good. Just follow that process, and I'm looking forward to Pam's presentation.
So I'm glad we're gonna get you a little bit more. I'm gonna have to pull you, I'm gonna pull you back in now. You've been away from us for a while, but we have to bring you back in
You need
now.
to talk to a certain director about that.
I will.
You know,
Yeah.
when Jack was talking about putting in that structure to catch the silt before it goes into the canal, to me, that was an important part of the process, was to prevent the pollution, to clear the water up. So, you know, that's why I wanted to go back over that criteria, because I think it's more than just the dredging. It's how to prevent it from happening again and protect the water quality in the canals.
And you guys, I don't know if you remember this or not, you guys have already approved a couple projects that had those structures in there. So Orange Lake,
Yes.
the stormwater drains that came in, they have those separators now.
Mhm.
And also Newport Richie, the drains, I think I want to say Madison Street project that you guys recommended for the state expenditure plan, that also have those separators in there. So I really like that idea. I think it's good.
And I'd tell you, talking to the folks up and down, we've talked about it, because the biggest problem we have, like in the Woodlands area, the Landings area, also up and down Puffin Lane, et cetera, where all that drain comes in is where the silt goes right in. And it goes out only like, 200 yards, 300 yards, but it's all from the street. And if we can hold on to that, we'd be much better off. And I think everybody there is willing to say that's a good use. And maybe that's where stormwater funds can come in, building those structures for us, because there should be a stormwater facility that's right there. These people are willing to set up long-term plans for a long-term MSBU. Maybe it's only $20 or $50 a year after this is all done to hold it. And there's other things we can do, such as, making sure the stormwater from the roof doesn't go into the grass, then going into the canal. But if we do direct discharge with the folks as well as part of their control, where it goes right into the Gulf, into the canal, it's a direct discharge, which probably treat asphalt shingle roofs, but other than that, pretty much if it's a steel roof, can go right in. And that gets the flushing going better as well, keeps the pesticides out. And one last thing that I just found with my neighbor, she had a lawnmower that was like, it would pick up the leaves and control all the leaves right in play. These associations could actually put the same type of conditions in, where instead of mowing the grass where it goes into the canal, right? I know in Beacon Woods, we have people that do it right along the canal. There's nothing holding, the fertilizer goes in, the grass goes in, and guess what? It goes right in the canal, and you got Floritam Islands going through it. So we can work on fixing all that in all these communities coming up too. So I think everybody's fully engaged that they want to get it all right, and then put a long-term plan in for water quality, as well as minimizing the dredging stuff we ever need to do.
Yeah, I think that would strengthen the value of the plan.
Some time ago, years ago, we had that whole list that we ranked, and I haven't seen it for a long time. I'd be curious. I know we brought up some of the things since, and they've been done or no longer apply. I wouldn't mind seeing that list with
We have
where
that
we're
list. We still have that.
Okay.
Yeah, and where we stand on some of those projects.
Yeah.
And,
I can.
and where we need to do maybe some pushing.
But as far as adding all these new communities to it, if there's money, I think we should. If we've only got a fraction of the money to do all this dredging, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to keep adding to make our permitting problem harder and the approval problem if we can't afford it anyway.
Well, then again, the money that we're putting in is not going to take care of all the dredging, but it's going to provide the seed money to get the people to come in to say, okay, once we studied all we know what's going to cost, now we can go out to them to say, okay, here's what you need to contribute to make it happen. And pretty much most of your canal communities are pretty affluent. They're willing to put in, they would see the immediate benefit right away. And if we structure it, we do the whole thing in one shot, maybe it's like a 2-year project up and down the coast. It's all done in one shot. They're paying for it. They see the benefit for it. And then everyone's that much better off for down the road. So again, it's not going to cover everything, but with their participation, when they see the numbers, it's a lot easier. Like talking with Nick, the only reason they had to run before the board, they didn't have any numbers yet. As soon as George can come up with the first set of numbers, we can then go focus at least on those 3. That can be the template for the rest of it to be done as well. And again, with this legislation that's coming up, if that gets approved, then we'll be in so much better shape cost-wise to do everything we want to go do.
So I have to find out first if there is money available and how we go about requesting that money from Restore, and whether or not we'll have to go back through the formal process that we have. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure, I think, you guys are right, we will have to do that. That'll be something to be fully discussed to bring it back in, and
Yeah.
again, with public comment, I think that's a good thing to do, because let's face it, it's been how many years, 7 years? Good time to take a relook at it, and as hot as this item has become, and restoration is a big thing for everything we're talking about, water resiliency.
Right.
I think it's got some merit.
Yeah.
And we've actually applied for even to get some state money to help us. But with this state budget, I'm not counting on the money. But the legislation, I told them, is probably even more important than the money to cut our costs down and speed of the permitting process.
Well, I can tell you that I had a recent experience with Treasury. I submitted the final application for the Port Richey, the city's project that they have dredging going on out there in the bayou. And I went round and round with Andrew there at Treasury on public comment. And I had a hard time finding minutes from meetings that the city had. Eventually, I did find what he needed to satisfy him, but that was the biggest thing. He really didn't care about what they were doing. He wanted to know what the public had to say about it. So it's still a very high priority on their list, is to make sure that the public has input into all of these projects.
If you would, then make sure, let's stay close with Colleen as well, so we do get ready to have this next meeting coming up, that we can invite them so they can watch it.
Sure.
Right now, this is being Zoom for everybody as well, so we can let them all know where it's going to be, how it's going to be on. They can put in, they can either email or their comments in, or on the other hand, and I think we'll get plenty of input.
Well, our next scheduled meeting for the RAC is the first Thursday of April.
Okay.
Not sure exactly what day it's April 1st,
Okay.
right here, 6 to 8 o'clock. So anybody who wants to send in comments, they can send them to me or
Okay.
Colleen or.
All right, let's get started that earlier. That'll let us get everything in the newsletters that they have coming up, and we'll be fully prepped for it.
Okay.
In the interim, if you can, maybe send the whole committee all the information for how this Restore Committee was set up, how the pots were set up, and then you can look at it ahead of time. The score sheets that we did before too is easy enough, accessible, that they can look at that too, and then we kind of get a feel for the projects we've done. And when we do come in, we'll have a nice, lively debate and conversation about it.
A lot of the stuff's on the website anyways.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff on the website. I believe it's all there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can send it to you. It's easy.
Maybe just send everybody the-
What exactly is, if I want to get to the website, how do I get to it?
My Pasco County, that you get the app for your phone and then you just go through.
Oh, okay, I know. I've been on that app before, and I still.
So maybe can we send everybody, is there a link we can send them?
I'll send you the link.
We'll send you the link.
Okay, why don't you do that, because, instead of going and hunting and searching, because I've gone round and round on that app before.
Yep.
By the way, I thought I had a citizens appointee I was going to be nominating at the commission this past meeting, but last minute the person declined. I've got another person in mind. If anybody else had a person in mind?
I have a person in mind. I told him today.
Okay, all right, so send me their information and we'll take a look at both of them before we bring it to the
Told him
board.
to email Pamela his resume.
Okay,
Yeah. And I also received another email today from another person who's interested. So,
okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
All right, that'll give us 3 to look at. But I want to probably bring this before the board before that, so we can have them on board the next meeting.
Did you find out if Josh McCart would be?
I didn't. I have to talk to our attorney about that.
Okay.
I'm not. Cynthia, are you still on the school board?
Yes.
You are? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm not really sure if that would be a conflict or not, but I'll talk with Joe.
Who is it?
Josh McCart?
What does it?
Works for the schools?
The citizen.
Science.
Environmental.
No, science.
Okay.
Environmental Marine Coordinator. guy.
So he's the one that's been working on the pontoon.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I'm on the committee as school board. That's an elected position where he's really an employee.
Right.
So
Now, would that be a conflict, Joe, do you think?
I don't think so. School employee that would meet one of the other criteria, I don't see that as a conflict.
Well, his group is also one of the recipients too, though.
Yeah, they're also, they're a recipient of Restore funds.
But that's already been voted on and done.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's going to have any influence
Persuasion.
over.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
But would it prohibit the school system from getting money in the future?
I can take a look at that. I don't know if it is.
Maybe we'll get you all 3 resumes just to make sure there's no conflicts on anything anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the formal process, is to submit their resume along with a letter explaining their desire and their experience.
Right, because we've had people from PHSC that were going to be receiving money directly, and they were employees of the PHSC.
Right.
So I don't know if that'd be any different than them.
All right.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
good to know we get 3 of them anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next meeting will be April 1st, 2021, from here to 6 to 8. Any other thoughts, comments that you want to see at the next meeting? Okay. Move to adjourn?
A second.
Well, you can make.
Move to,
No,
second, whatever.
All in favor, say aye. All right.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
That one does not take a second.
She's doing well?
I hope you feel well.
She's got a broken foot, but she's about. No, she didn't even know. It's just sore for a month or so.